Okay, in the first two videos on verb phrases, we defined the verb phrase. We talked about the head being the focus of the phrase. We talked about some characteristics. We talked about it being tensed, the verb phrase being tensed or non-tensed, whether the verb phrase had aspect, whether the verb phrase had active or passive voice, which mood the verb phrase is in, and what modality the verb phrase might have. And there are a lot of different kinds of modality. Okay, so in this video, I want to talk about the syntax, which we talked about is the word order. It's kind of the word order that we've all agreed on, so we all understand what we're talking about. Okay, and I'm going to start from the back because every verb phrase must have a lexical verb or a lexical verb substitute. Okay, and most of the time it's going to be a lexical verb. Okay, substitutes are rather rare, and it requires a lot of special circumstances in the sentences surrounding the one you're writing. Okay, so but we need a lexical verb or substitute. Now, everything else comes before that, and everything else comes before that in a certain order, and everything that comes before forces the form of what comes after. So let's do the first one. The one that would be right in front of the lexical verb, if you have multiple, is the passive auxiliary. The passive auxiliary is be, and the passive auxiliary is always followed by the ed form. Okay, the past participle. Okay, so let's move ahead. Progressive. Progressive auxiliary, which is again the word be, but in this case followed by the present participle, the ing form. Okay, moving on. We have the perfect auxiliary, and that is always a form of the verb have, and that is always followed by the ed form of the verb. And then finally, the modal verb, if we have one, modal verb, and I'm going to put just an example because there are 9 of them. So, for example, can, and that is always followed by the base form. Okay, so let's do a couple so we can kind of see how this works. So we're going to use as our lexical verb, we're going to use the verb baked, as we used up above. Okay, so is baking. Okay, now we talked about every verb phrase has a head, and in this case the head is the first verb in the phrase, and the head, if the verb phrase is tensed, it's the head which carries the tense. So it's in this case it's the verb be. In this case, Sheila is baking. So Sheila is third person singular. So we use the third person singular of the verb be. Okay, that was easy enough. Sheila has baked. Okay, so again, this is now the head of the verb phrase. It carries the tense. And so it has to agree with Sheila. Sheila is third person singular. So we use the third person singular of the verb have. Okay, and this happens to be the third person singular present of the verb have. Or I take it back, the third person past. Oh no, I got it right. It's third person singular. So has baked. Had baked would be the past. Okay, so we'll have that. Now let's Sheila could bake. Okay. Now this is the head of the verb phrase, and it carries the tense. But there's a catch. The modal verbs do not decline for either past, present, person, or number. Okay. So we just by convention we call them tense, and the only reason we do that is so we can say, oh yeah, the head of the verb phrase is tensed. Okay, this is the head of the verb phrase. Therefore, it must be tensed. But in fact, all the forms are the same. It's always could. I could, you could, we could, they could. It's always could. It never changes. Okay, so Sheila could bake, and we're happy that's good enough agreement for our purposes. Okay, now we can start combining them. So let's do this. Could have been. Oh, I take that back. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay. Now it's still going to be the same form because it drives that. So could have been baked. Okay. Now, we said here if I put been over here, how would I have known the difference between this been being the progressive auxiliary and this been being the passive auxiliary? And again, it's by the form of the verb that follows. Okay, if I had said could have been baking, then this would have been perfect progressive, not perfect passive. So, and then we could, let's go all out, could have been, and of course this is going to drive it to ing, the present participle, could have been being baked. Okay, and since it's passive, we can't have Sheila doing the action anymore. The cake could have been being baked. Okay. I think that covers that. But now we can have modifiers. Okay? And as we talked about before, we can have pre-modifiers and post-modifiers. And here's the catch. The post-modifiers, which are words like, and I'll just throw one in here, enough, always come after, has baked enough. Okay, they always come, if the post-modifiers always come after the lexical verb. The pre-modifiers can actually come in a lot of different places. Is slowly baking. The cake is slowly baking. The cookies are slowly baking. Okay. Could just have been baked. Could have, that's one way of doing it, could just have been baked, meaning that in time they were baked. They could have been just baked, okay, which really more implies that they could have been just baked but not frosted. Okay, so baking is the only thing that happened to them. Okay. And finally, we'll put that one up here, finally could have been being baked. Okay. So where you put the, I'll leave the just right here. Okay, I'll leave the just right here. So where you put a pre-modifier, you know, where in the either before the entire phrase, between the first and second, or the second and third, I mean, depending on how many you have, can subtly change the meaning and really kind of takes on an art form of where you place it in the thing. And maybe we'll do a whole video on some of the subtleties of meaning you get from moving the pre-modifier around to give you different things. And it depends a lot on the adverb as well. Slowly would probably always be right before the, almost all the time would be right before the lexical verb. Okay. So quickly, slowly, adverbs of velocity would always be right before the lexical verb. Okay. So let me take what time I have left to go back and very quickly review. Verb phrases, one or more words that function as a verb. The head is the focus of the phrase and is always a verb. Characteristics. A verb phrase can be tensed or non-tensed. A verb phrase can have one of the four aspects. Simple being it really doesn't have any aspect. It can have progressive, it can have perfect, or it can have perfect progressive, but not the other way around. Okay, it's always in that order. Okay, it can be either active or passive voice. Active is far and away the more common. It can have either indicative, imperative, or subjunctive moods. And again, indicative is far and away the most common, with imperative a distant second and subjunctive an even more distant third. And then it can have various forms of modality. Like we say, there's a lot of kinds that give the point of view of the author. Predictability, ability, desirability, permission, compulsion. There's a lot of choices there. We'll probably do a couple of videos on that. And then the syntax, you can have basically up to 5. And I guess we'll put lexical verb bake in some form for an example. Okay, you always have to have a lexical verb or a lexical verb substitute, which will either be a modal or the verb do. But we'll talk more about that. But 99% of the time it's going to be a lexical verb. Okay, and then all of these others, you can have 1 or 0, and if you have them, they always have to come in this order. The modal first, then the perfect, then the progressive, then the passive, with the lexical always being in the last position. Okay? And then the modifiers, some adverbs can be pre-modifiers, other adverbs can be post-modifiers. The post-modifiers always go behind the lexical verb, but the pre-modifiers can actually move around. They can be in several different places, and they actually subtly change the meaning depending on how they move around. So that's an art form we might want to look into later. So with that, I will kind of return you to the top, and I will go make another video.